Okay, hello to this product steering meeting concerning the proposal from Etienne, Xavier, Just, and Sonny regarding the SLO monitoring. As this is a product steering meeting, we will focus primarily on the whether we want to do it and why we want to do it, and not too much on the technical details. From a structural perspective, first, Etienne will do a short recap. We assume everybody already read the proposal, but just to get it into everybody's mind again, up to 10 minutes for the recap for Etienne, and then we go into a longer discussion and clarification part. So we clarify, open questions, we give feedback, challenge the proposal overall. This is what we do in this meeting, and then in a follow-up meeting, which will not be recorded, which will be private with the project sponsors, we will actually do the decision, so basically the go or no-go decision, and report that afterwards. So with that, I hand it over to Etienne.
Okay, thank you, Johannes. So I prepared a quick presentation. So let me share this. Let me open it. Okay, and then share this. Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
All right. So, okay, thank you everybody for being here. So this is a proposal for Gartner SLO monitoring. So small agenda. So I'm going to talk about disclaimer, proposal, the motivations. We're going to have a look at the high-level architectures, some of the limitations that we have been identified so far, and then we're going to be able to move to questions and feedback. So first of all, disclaimer. So this is a high/mid-level proposal. So we have not figured out all the technical details yet. As Johannes said earlier, this is the product steering committee, and I kind of understood so far that the process is not super clear. At least it wasn't super clear to me. Like, what's the biggest difference between product and technical, and like how much details needed to be put. So yeah, just big disclaimer, like all the technical details have not fully been figured out yet. And yeah, me, as well as all of the team working on it, we're first-timers on the Gartner open source. So we've been working in Gartner as SREs for SAP for multiple years, but participating in the open source is a first for us. So yeah, just disclaimer about that. And many decisions have already been taken with the monitoring team. So we had multiple private talks with them to gather their feedback and see if we could do things differently. So the proposal that we did has partly been modified from feedback from monitoring colleagues. So what's the proposal? So we want to create SLO metrics for the whole of Gartner. That being said, we want to do it from the customer, and by customer I mean chute owner or chute operator perspective. Which means all of the SLOs that we are going to set up are supposed to reflect the customer perspective, or in the SRE books they talk about the customer happiness, but happiness only from the reliability standpoint, not from the feature standpoint. So yeah, of course, for this proposal, we want to do it. Have all of the SLO metrics and all of the infrastructure resources delivered via Gartner extension. Of course, through that extension, we're going to be able to adjust the thresholds for the SLOs, adjust the thresholds also for SLIs potentially, and create new Prometheus instances. A new Prometheus instance in the runtime cluster, which I named Prometheus SLO. The motivations for that, essentially, so we want to make day 2 operation smoother for new Gartner operators. So, of course, we want to drive adoption with Gartner. This is an awesome product, but yeah, having day 2 operation toolings, for example, for SLOs, which helps with reliability of the system as a whole. Yeah, it is a must to help drive adoption in my opinion. We also, of course, follow SRE best practices. So we're an SRE team. And so, yeah, we focus, as I said before, on the user's happiness towards reliability. And also having SLOs. Again, this is something that comes from the SRE books from Google. But one of the big advantages of SLOs, it enables teams, but particularly development teams, to prioritize work between reliability and feature-wise. So essentially, if your SLO is going down, well, then it's probably easier it's probably a good thing to prioritize reliability fixes rather than adding new features. And the opposite is also true. If reliability is going well, maybe it's a good thing to focus on features. So it's always a balance between both, and SLOs is a very good tool to help make those decisions. And finally, provide more meaningful metrics for alerting. So right now we do have alerting that is part of Gartner, if I recall correctly. But it's more looking at specific metrics and shoot conditions. We're going to come back to shoot conditions a bit later. But yeah, having SLOs is a good way of alerting, because SLOs is supposed to reflect users' happiness, and so when you want to be alerted as a Gartner operator when your user is getting affected. Of course, there are other times that you want to be alerted to make sure that we don't get there, but one of the main alerting is when there's an impact to the customers. So yeah. Then looking at the high level architecture, so the biggest part I would say is probably in the runtime cluster with the Prometheus SLO. And basically what that does is federate actually metrics from other Prometheuses. So we are not scrapping any metrics from pods or from end destination directly. We are only federating metrics from various Prometheuses. So from the Prometheus Garden. And of course, we want to federate metrics to the Prometheus chute, but of course we cannot do that directly from the runtime cluster, so we have to go through the Prometheus aggregate to do that. And so yeah, so everything you see in blue also is basically everything that is new, and everything that is black is all of the existing architecture in Gartner right now. Now, talking about limitations, the first one, so this extension is not meant for SLAs. So there are three major things in the SRE book. So you have SLIs, service level indicators, SLOs, service level objectives, and SLAs, service level agreement. So the SLI is basically just the actual metric that is getting used to assess the reliability of the system, the various metrics. And then the SLO is just taking this SLI and adding a threshold, since real world isn't perfect. So we always start from a standpoint that 100% reliability or availability is simply not humanly possible. There are going to be problems. And now it's about managing the error budget. So how much problems we can have for a given amount of time. So I added some calculation here, but the threshold is essentially 100 minus the error budget. So if we have 99.9% threshold, it means we have a 0.1% error budget, which equals, when you put it weekly, it's about 10 minutes of downtime per week for a specific SLO, for a specific metric. It's usually stricter than SLAs. There are circumstances when you can go around this rule, but usually you want your SLOs to be much stricter than your SLAs, because you never want to get to your SLAs. When you get to your SLAs, so that's basically the availability contract with the customer. And it's usually related to financial penalties. So if we break SLAs, there are usually financial penalties that are related to that. And so since we never want to get there, well, SLOs have to be stricter to have another, basically, we have the error budget and SLO as a buffer, and then we have another buffer between the SLO and the SLA to make sure that we never, or at least very rarely, get to breach the SLAs. Another thing also, SLOs are not always SLAs. So since SLOs are internal only, sometimes you could have SLOs just to, again, make sure that your system as a whole is working well, that the reliability is working well, but you don't have any attached SLAs, so any contract with the customer for that. And that's totally fine. That's totally all right still. And then big thing, so as I said, SLAs is available to the user, so the SLAs may be displayed to the users as well, compared to SLO, which is strictly internal and is usually not shared with the customer. Then the second one about, so these are some of the key caveats that we had while working through this proposal. So first one is seed and accessibility. So some seed have some network restrictions that prevent connection to come from the runtime cluster to the seed directly. And this is especially true for when the seed is behind a firewall, essentially, that does not allow anything. The seed still works because GardenLet, of course, is able to NAT and go through NAT and basically go through the Garden API server, so the virtual cluster. But yeah, that's not possible with federate, the way that we federate metrics at the moment, because federate is always from the source Prometheus to the destination one. So the Prometheus SLO to the aggregate Prometheus in our case. So there are two solutions that we envision for that. So first is having a VPN between the runtime cluster and the seeds, similar to what we have between the seeds and the chute. Or we could use another feature from Prometheus, which is remote write, which is, instead of doing federation, so taking from point A and federating to point B, well, then we're just asking B to send the data to A. So we can still use the natting that way. And so, yeah, but using remote write would require some also some more programming to make sure it works based on the seeds configuration.
Etienne, can we go
Yes.
to the, or come soon to the questions? And
yeah, so actually,
part?
so this is the last slide if you
Okay,
allow me to finish,
perfect.
but I can stop it now if you...
No,
if
you can just complete it and then...
Yeah, okay. Then it's, yeah, using metrics versus chute and conditions. So we choose to not really use chute conditions for most of the availability because we see it's not precise enough and sometimes a bit too slow. So we preferred using metrics directly from the chute Prometheuses. And also using a dedicated Prometheus versus an existing Prometheus. So we decided to use another dedicated Prometheus mainly for the metrics retention policy, which is different from the Prometheus that we have right now, and also to minimize potential CPU and memory impacts. But yeah, that's it. So yeah, please feel free if you have questions, if you have feedback, we're all open for it.
Perfect. Thank you, Etienne. Then let's go into the clarifying questions. Any questions from anyone in the round?
I already commented this on the PR, and I was wondering how this relates to the connectivity exporter project that we had in the past. So this eBPF-based availability monitoring.
So as I said, the PR wasn't aware of this availability exporter. So I found out about it when you commented the PR. That being said, since it uses eBPF, that means it's fetching metrics from the node. So I'm not sure if it was from the nodes of the seeds or the nodes of the chute. But still, what we're proposing here is something a bit more high level and a bit more global to the whole landscape. So basically reusing existing metrics in order to create SLOs doesn't prevent us to add some metrics to have more precise SLOs. But the proposal here is more about the architecture of how we can gather all of those metrics in order to create global SLOs for a particular landscape.
Okay. Then if you want to focus on the architecture, I'm also wondering, I think it has also been mentioned by Raphael, why this particular feature should be implemented in an extension instead of in Gardener core itself, because it will touch most components managed by Gardener itself, and there are no proper extension points for these objects like the Prometheus in the seed and so on.
Honestly, it's a good point. I'm open to do it in Gardener Core directly if that's what better. As I said, we're first timer to the Gardener open source, so I'm not particularly super aware of like what's what would be the advantages of using an extension rather than integrating it to Gardener Core. I guess we choose extension just because to have an opt-in feature, so something that you can use if you want, you don't have to use it if you don't. Because it does add some CPU. So when we metrics, some of the SLO's metrics are partially calculated and compiled from the Prometheus, the shoot Prometheus, and probably even the Garden Prometheus. So this does add some potential impact. So that's why we went to with the extension routes for to minimize impact. But if decision is to integrate it to Gardener Core, we're all for it for sure.
Yeah, just to basically answer this question, there are other opt-in features in Gardener Core itself, like for example the monitoring stack. After all, can be disabled. So yeah, I don't see why we would need an extension just for making it opt-in. We can also have a switch in Gardener itself.
Okay.
No more clarifying questions? Everything clear? That's a bit surprising, but okay.
I guess I have mostly concerns more to the discussion part. From a clarifying perspective, I think I'm good.
Okay, then let's move on to feedback discussion part, general.
Yeah, so in general, I don't think adding another VPN mechanism from the Garden runtime cluster to the seeds is a good idea. I expect that this will come with a lot of complexity and might not be as stable as we would want it to be. In general, I have seen more monitoring architectures using the push approach, push to a central instance, and yeah, I lean towards it. This is just a feeling. I don't have much experience in all of this federation stuff, but yeah, in the end, I don't think opening up the network path in the other direction in comparison to what is already built into Gardener with the pull-based approach by Gardenlet is a good idea. So
I mean, maybe I
I
can
would
explain a bit more.
avoid the
So
VPN.
So yeah, we were also leaning towards a push-based approach. So this is the remote write feature from Prometheus. I think Vedran, when I had some private conversation with him, proposed a VPN because there might be other use cases that would require connection from the runtime cluster to the seed.
Exactly. I also wanted to say something. Right. So we are thinking about implementing possibly more extensions, integrating them also in the dashboard. And there is always the same problem when it comes to those. How do you get to the data? So unless the data gets always centrally pushed all the time, which also costs money, the data can only be fetched. Now, the idea to fetch it is not new. We did that already in the past, but if the seeds are behind the firewall, it's a problem. So therefore, I was thinking, I mean, the VPN could be a solution for that. But we don't have to bundle it with this particular enhancement proposal. So it can still be a push-based approach if this is the right one for this particular problem. But I think eventually we will have to find a solution. I don't think it's a good state to be in that we cannot reach from central components into the seeds. We have no VPN there. We have solved that problem between seed and shoot. We have not solved the problem between runtime clusters and seed clusters. And what we cannot do is always push all data. So this is not going to fly. And if we want to offer a catalog of extensions, right now we have kind of very few hard-coded ones. So DNS, cert management, LACOM image signing, registry cache, etc. So we have a few. We have some tools that you can run manually, like Digi, etc. So if we ever want to integrate that and give a much better user experience right from the dashboard or through the dashboard, then we need some back channel, and we don't have that. That's missing for a very long time. Anyway, so this is all I wanted to say. I see a good reason to have that, and it's always the same answer if I talk to the Gartner dashboard colleagues. No, we cannot implement it because we cannot get to the data. It's always the same, and this is a problem. Yeah, but as I said, I don't want to hijack this meeting for this particular component.
Fair enough, but because, I mean, we are anyway in a product steering and we identified already that this is a potential problem and we have potentially two solutions, and we can still, on the technical side, at a later point in time, decide what we want to do there.
Mm.
Yeah, and that thing prevents also doing both. I mean, doing remote write, as I said, so right now it's not totally possible because the Prometheus operator that we use to deploy all of the Prometheus resources does not support remote write at the moment. But I saw that there were PRs that were merged, like I think 2 days ago. So work is in progress. So hopefully it's going to be available soon. But yeah, doesn't mean we don't have we cannot do that as well and give that possibility and still have a VPN as well. So
I
yeah,
think
maybe for efficiency
using the
reasons.
Prometheus operator, you can also use remote write. There's just no dedicated custom resource for it. So you just set a spec field in the Prometheus object, but you can use remote write when using Prometheus operator.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe another point that I can come up if unless you want to keep talking about this is about whether we use the same Prometheus as we have or we use a different Prometheus in the runtime cluster.
I think from my point of view, it's not a bad idea to start with a new one, to have it separated, and then we can gather experience and see if it's not doing much, we can still move it to the other one later on, I suppose.
You wrote at the pull request enhancement proposal that the monitoring team suggested that. So because my natural inclination would have been the opposite, to reuse what we already have. I, as an operator, don't actually want to deal with too many different endpoints. So yeah, what is the reasoning from the monitoring colleagues to actually suggest here to use another one?
Can maybe comment on that. I think the two main reasons were already mentioned in Etienne's presentation. So our first concern is a little bit the load on the Garden Prometheus. We a while ago had a regression where we, I think, doubled the amount of metrics that were collected there, which brought that instance basically to the memory limit of the nodes that we were using. Of course, there is some headroom, but it's not endless. And the second reason, of course, is then the different retention requirements. So in the GAN Prometheus, we have a retention time of a few days, I guess. I don't know it spontaneously. Here we rather want to go for a few
10 days, actually.
10 days, it could be. Yeah. Here, I think we rather want to go for a few months. Alternatively, we would have this long-term Prometheus in the runtime cluster, but that also has to be introduced for very specific reasons to, I think, collect the metering data for a longer time range. Reusing that would maybe rather be a fit, but again, might bring the risk that we get close to the limits of a single node.
Okay, thank you very much. Makes a lot of sense.
Maybe just to add to that, I recently learned that the monitoring team is even more thinking about having other Prometheus instances, right? So maybe a dedicated one for the metering data, maybe one for Istio. Now this one for the SLO data. So this, yeah, will or seems to increase anyways number of Prometheus.
The modern trend. Okay.
I mean, it's kind of one of the principles behind Prometheus to have small instances for very dedicated purposes. Keep them close to the workload, and it's a bit different than you see nowadays, rather with these scale-out solutions like Cortex, Thanos, Mime, and what else. So it's I would say in the Prometheus world still the way to go to keep instances small and for specific reasons.
I mean, eventually this will always be a bottleneck. So if we do not switch to a scaling solution, then a very large Gartner installation can blow up everything.
Indeed.
Maybe
Any
this is
more?
also
Yeah,
too
sorry.
detailed for now, but I was also wondering how you are collecting like an external view from within the seed. So Johannes already mentioned that there is this well-known kubeproxy shortcut, meaning if you connect to a load balancer IP from within the cluster, you typically don't reach the load balancer, but instead connect to the workload behind the load balancer directly, meaning the pods themselves. So as long as you don't have external infrastructure, I expect that you will not be able to fulfill your goal of getting a proper monitoring for the customer's view.
So if I understand correctly, your concern is that we're going through, so to collect metrics, we're essentially going through the QAPI proxy, which is going through the VPN, which is not always super reliable. Is that what I'm
No,
understanding?
that's unrelated to the VPN itself. So if you would use the black box exporter, for example, running on the seed cluster to check the external API endpoint of shoot API servers, you will never go through the load balancer that is used to expose the API servers.
That problem is already solved. We have a second black box exporter running on the shoot nodes, if I remember correctly. And at the moment, with that, we monitor both paths, the in-seed connection and the external connection.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So all we did here is reusing existing monitoring metrics that were available from the Prometheus shoot. Now, maybe in the future, we want to add other metrics to make that even more, to make our SLOs reflect even more the customer perspective or the customer reliability perspective. But yeah, basically right now we already have two black box supporter, one in the seed and one in the shoot, at least in our landscape. I don't know if it's the case for all of the landscapes by default, but yeah.
But I don't think it's the same. I also wrote it in the enhancement proposal. So the one that is in the shoot is actually going through the front door. That is true, but it's also going through the VPN back, I think. So it is testing a lot more, and the seed one is not reliable, as we also know from the dependency watchdog. So on certain cloud providers, it is simply shortcutted. It doesn't go, even though you want to go over the load balancer, it isn't going over the load balancer. So some other probes would be needed. The ones that we have today are probably neither is what you want. If you only want to track the API server.
Yeah, there was one probe that I wanted to add from the shoot, because yeah, the shoot right now only looks at the Kubernetes service, so not necessarily the external DNS directly. But I didn't know about the other one that
it is
some
always
providers.
the external one. It is using the Kubernetes service, but in the end, it goes through the regular path.
But it goes through the API server proxy, which has some kind. So I'm not an expert on it, but has some kind of abstraction and uses another port than the regular kubeAPI server, which when you use the default address for the kubeAPI server. So depending if you use the Kubernetes service,
Johannes is the expert, but yes, this is what I meant. It is testing a lot more. It's also going through the load balancer and the Istio service, right, Johannes? But it's using the different port and other things are tested, and then it goes via the VPN back. So the probe is not what you want to use. You will need something else because it's testing too much. And okay, in regards to the port, even not the same. And on the seat, it's pointless. You will not get what you want.
Yeah, I mean, I added the SLI's metrics in the proposal. I thought it was more for the technical, so that's why I didn't add them at the beginning, even though we figured out. But yeah, definitely we can definitely talk about improving the the way that we calculate availability for the kubeAPI server. Yeah.
Okay, if we just omit all the technical details for now, I still have some concerns about whether the proposed SLOs are sensible, meaning shoot creation or machine creation can very much be influenced by the configuration of the shoot or even workload on the shoot and so on and so forth. So it's probably not a valuable SLI to keep an eye out for the Gardener operator, I would expect. And also machine creation is very much depending on the cloud provider. And yeah, also latency can be negatively influenced by shoot workloads or webhooks. I think all of these points were already added by Vedran as well. So yeah, I think monitoring the availability of the API server is something you can and should do, but apart from that, I expect that it's hard to reach meaningful SLOs.
So that's a good point. We, of course, did think about that because, of course, for latency and for error rate, the customer definitely does have a role to play there. But again, we want the SLOs to reflect the customer perspective. So from an SRE standpoint, it does not really matter if the problem comes from us, so from hosting the service, or from the customer. The customer still has a bad experience. And we can still help the customer maybe if we have those metrics that shows high latency or high error rate, we can still advise the customer, say, hey, we noticed there is that. Then we did a smaller CA, and we realized that it's probably more related to your workload. And then would you like some help in order to solve that? Now, maybe that's not going to be relevant for all of for all of the landscapes, or so we're from SAP, so from other customers using Gartner, maybe that's not relevant. In that case, of course, there is going to be an opt-in and opt-out feature for every single SLOs. But we still, so even though the problem could very well come from the customer, it's still relevant information in our opinion, for what I said before. And about the nodes creation latency, pretty similar. We want to look at trends, and one thing we need to not forget is that SLOs have a threshold. So for example, the Kube API server, of course, we want it to be super available, so something like 99.9, maybe even above. But for machine creation latency, since we know that in the real world there is a lot of things that can happen between the cloud provider, the VM host, and stuff like that, we can adjust this threshold to be, for example, 85%. Because again, SLOs does not equal SLA. So we can adjust those thresholds to take into account those real world latencies or gap that can happen, which and it's just a matter of adjusting the SLO threshold. Essentially. So I agree with your point, but I still think they are valuable.
Yeah, I get that not all of these SLOs are something that you would share with the customer and whatever. Still, if those values are influenced by so many conditions that you can't influence, it's also hard to interpret trends in those numbers, right? So if from one day to another, all customers tend to create larger cluster, and that's why shoot creation takes longer. That's a trend, but it will be very hard to interpret from the numbers. That's what I'm saying. So it might not be as meaningful as you might hope. Still, it would be good to collect those. I don't object this in general. I'm just really concerned that the numbers are not meaningful enough to derive actions from it.
Fair enough. And maybe to add some details to your concern, SLOs are also not meant for troubleshooting. They're meant to reflect the reliability from the customer standpoint, right? So if there's an alert or if something goes through the threshold, then that's why we have the rest of the monitoring architecture to help us troubleshoot, right? So yeah, and also since we centralize all of this data at one place, if we see a problem with one cluster, but maybe with not the same problem with other clusters, then it could be easier to figure out that this problem is something specific to something rather than a global problem. But yeah, basically there are mitigations that we can put in place to help mitigate those. And yeah, depending on your use case, maybe you want to have those, maybe you don't. But yeah, still valuable, I believe, from the customer reliability standpoint.
Yeah, I think I share Tim's concern that some of the defined SLOs might be difficult to actually, to put actions on it. But that's maybe also something we can then learn. I think I agree that the availability of the API server is certainly something useful. If we can measure it somehow in a good way. And I think for the others, it might be interesting to see if shoot creation takes longer over time, whether then, as Tim mentioned, it just means that people create bigger clusters and that takes longer, or there are some other changes where Monday people create small clusters and Tuesday people create large clusters and so on, and we have something going up and down. I think we can still learn from that. So I think starting with those is not a bad idea. And then maybe getting rid of something where we see that it doesn't bring value later on.
Yeah. And again, to that threshold is the most important point, because you can set the threshold based on those real world activities, depending on the landscape. And of course, this would be there would be some default, I guess, but this will need to be configurable based on the different landscapes, because the requirements for each Gardner landscape is definitely different. So yeah.
Maybe just for understanding, so what is it that this feature, be it an extension or be it in Gardener directly, will have to do in the end? So is it about maybe creating this additional Prometheus instance? And what else? So creating scrape configs and alerting rules, or what else does it need to do?
So essentially what it's going to do is create, as you said, the Prometheus SLO in the runtime cluster. Then it's going to create some recording rules in existing Prometheuses, so mainly the shoot Prometheus, and maybe slash probably the Gardener Prometheus, because since we're already in the runtime cluster, maybe we can do it in the SLO, the Prometheus SLO, but essentially create recording rules in order to calculate those SLOs, and then create config for federation across the various Prometheus to only keep the SLO the SLO calculation, so the SLI actually in the Prometheus SLO, and then add the threshold in the dashboard and alerting rules for alerting and for displaying stuff in Plutono. So also dashboards in Plutono, of course.
So that sounds that it's mostly something that, yeah, there's not so much code needed, right? It's more configuration that this Kubernetes resources that this will create.
Yeah, it's mainly adding resources to Kubernetes. Yes. Then I mean the configuration part is going to will have to be coded, but it's fairly a small amount. Yeah.
Okay. I was just wondering whether if we still talk about an extension, whether it's really worth to build this extension with everything that comes with it, Docker image pipeline and so on, vulnerability scans, compared to just having some additional customized folders that just get applied and deploy the respective resources directly to the cluster.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, yeah, maybe Gardener Core makes more sense than the extension, indeed.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know why it keeps the thumbs up and thumbs down, but yeah.
I think because of your hand, because it sometimes looks like a thumbs
Oh, yeah,
up.
maybe. I'll stop moving my hands.
Okay.
Okay, any more feedback? Seems like we are
Just some general
understanding almost
feedback, I
everything.
guess. Sorry.
Perfect. No, perfect.
As already mentioned in the PR, my team has already set up availability monitoring for the shoots using some central black box exporter basically. And we also don't enable the shoot monitoring stack or use the monitoring stack deployed by Gardener. So I guess there is room for collaboration, but it will be hard to bring those worlds together from my expectation. And also the general availability monitoring or reporting requirements might very much be company specific in my expectation. So I guess it makes sense for you to go straight to developing this idea out in the open source world. That's perfectly fine. But from our side, I can already tell that it will be hard to use, integrate, or fit to our needs. It's just some general statement. It's probably not actionable for you, but just to make it complete here.
Just to understand him, that's because you don't use the monitoring stack, the Gardener monitoring stack, or because you want to use the probes from externally, so different.
Both, yes.
Both. Okay. Because I think, I mean, the one thing just enabling the monitoring stack is certainly a bigger endeavor and can't be simply done. If the metrics, I mean, as far as I understand, the architecture Etienne has laid out is pretty much depending on this federation hierarchy and so on. The question is whether it could be easy to bring in kind of through a side channel the metrics from another place, but I think it's somewhat a different architecture, and whether that really will work out, I don't know. Yeah, but I think it. If if Etienne and team would work on that in the open source, you could basically connect on your side with your team whether they see some opportunity for collaboration, because I think it might make sense to have a second input, different perspective into it, and whether it might, we might find a way to get also the data from a side channel in, which, then basically for you, only the part in the Garden runtime cluster might be interesting with some dashboards and so on, and the metrics come from somewhere else. I don't know.
Yeah, because I mean, what we propose, of course, is reusing a lot of the existing monitoring architecture that's from Gartner, at least from our perspective. And if you're using another monitoring solution, then it's going to be very hard to integrate. Indeed, maybe we can set up some open telemetry to help with that. But again, it had some overhead. But if you are still using Prometheus and still able to send data between Prometheuses, then I guess this is probably adaptable. You probably have different SLOs and different ways, but at least the architecture of gathering all of the metrics in one, like all of the reliability/availability metrics in the one central point can probably be reused. But yeah, of course, I don't know your monitoring architecture, but if you or your guys from availability want to reach out to us, please do. I'm more than happy to have some external feedback as well.
I have the feeling that this is not really or will not really work. I mean, what we do with open telemetry is basically accepting the fact that every company, every adopter is handling this in a different way. And the only thing that reasonably well works is providing the data, exporting it into whatever system the respective people are using. I think it's hopeless to try to provide a solution for everybody. That will not work. Companies specifically have very specific requirements, and what we do will be in vain for everybody in that sense. So this is primarily for us, which begs then, of course, the question how deeply we integrate it. It is also to your disadvantage if you do that, Etienne, and it needs to be, and then it is done in the main code base, then you will be also limited in how you can change it. It becomes kind of something like a contract.
It does complexify it for sure. Yep.
Yeah. And as said, I very much doubt that there will be many external adopters who can leverage it. So all we know from all the from the different use cases, everybody has their own solutions, which makes sense. They only want the data. They don't want us to tell them which kind of tools they're using.
Okay, any more feedback?
What are the monitoring colleagues saying to just this discussion about how useful it is to provide the full stacks at that level? because I mean, this seems to influence also a little bit the decision, right? So we can do it within the company. We don't have to do it as a solution if nobody is using it. On the other hand, if there would be potential for reuse, it makes, of course, more sense to do it this way. What is your feeling, Jeremy, Christoph, Victor?
I would also agree that it's very opinionated, and that was also why our suggestion was maybe make it an extension. But on the other hand side, it's basically applicable for our entire monitoring stack, and the signals that we monitor, that we record, that we alert for, it's all very, very opinionated. And with that regards, I basically would be open to both directions. Maybe it's a long-term rather question to make the entire monitoring stack an extension, which was recently already discussed, mostly driven by Nikki. But I would say it's still very closely connectable to our existing Gartner monitoring stack. So I would not be against having that as part of the core monitoring. That makes sense.
I would maybe add that it's a nice. I think it's a good idea to go by the book, especially if the book is written by Google. I think it's. I'm not really sure, especially with regards to what Etienne had also mentioned about alerting on those signals. In addition / instead of what we alert on now, I'm not sure the value add is at least clear. I'm not saying it's not there. I'm saying it's not that clear to me what it brings there in addition to what we already have. I think it highlights several topics. What was mentioned, what Christoph mentioned with the externalizing or moving monitoring into an extension is one of those, and the other thing is this remote write topic that we've touched upon. And I think to me, at least in this discussion, and maybe not on top of all of the discussions in the GitHub issue, but I think those are maybe some of the more valuable points to discuss for me.
Okay, if we have nothing else to say, I think that's good. It's we don't have a lot of follow-up discussions or open points. Then I assume we can close this meeting. I will invite to a separate decision meeting in a smaller round, and then we will share the details afterwards. With that, I thank everybody for attending, Etienne especially for presenting. So have a good day and see you next time.
Thank you, everybody, for your feedback.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.